Okay, so let's unpack this. We always, we celebrate the heroes, the ones who slay the monsters found in the cities. But what happens when the gods are just playing games and these legendary heroes are really just the loudest pieces on the board?
Exactly.
Today we're doing a deep dive, but not into the story you think you know. We're not really looking at Theseus' soaring glory. We're looking at the intimate, brutal cost paid by the women caught in his orbit.
That's the key. When you look at the foundational myths of Crete and Athens, and you focus on the daughters of King Minos, on Ariadne and Phaedra, the entire heroic narrative it shifts.
It totally flips.
Right. Our sources give us this incredibly compelling retelling that suggests, heroism is often built on a pretty flimsy foundation. A foundation of divine vanity, mortal betrayal, and this overwhelming sorrow that's borne almost silently by the female characters.
And the sources for this are just so rich. They give you this emotional, almost personal account of these interwoven destinies. It's a shortcut to understanding that classic Greek dynamic where power, whether it's from a king or a god, doesn't really operate with malice.
No, not at all.
It's worse. It's
Yeah.
this chilling, total indifference to human consequence.
And that's our mission today, really.
Ain't
To
it?
pull out those surprising connections and, frankly, the brutal truths hidden behind the legend. We're tracking figures like Minos, the trapped genius Daedalo, the self-serving Theseus, and the incredibly complex divinity of Dionysus.
And how their actions, which are motivated by ego or ambition, or maybe just sheer divine boredom.
Exactly, boredom. How those actions sent shockwaves through the lives of all the women tied to them. We promise you some serious aha moments about what glory really is
Wow.
and what kind of suffering is required for transcendence.
All right, let's jump right in. We have to start in Naxos with King Minos, a man who built this magnificent kingdom on two things: a lie to a god and a spectacular act of hubris.
Yeah, the foundation of Minos' whole claim to Crete was shaky, to say the least. He was fighting his own brothers for control, and to really solidify his rule, he needed a sign. He needed divine validation.
So he turns to the god of the sea, Poseidon.
And he doesn't just ask for a small favor. He makes this solemn, binding covenant. He prays for a truly magnificent bull to emerge from the sea, and he swears, that the moment it appears, he will sacrifice that beautiful creature right back to the god.
Acknowledging Poseidon's supremacy. It's a clear transaction.
It is, and it's a huge request. But Poseidon delivers. The bull that comes out of the sea foam is breathtaking, a creature of pure divine beauty and power. And this is where Minos' ego just completely takes over.
Can't bring himself to do it. Just can't kill it.
He can. He substitutes a lesser animal, actually believing he can trick an Olympian god. And this isn't just a political mistake. It's a profound, deep act of disrespect against a god who is, famous for his volatility, for his slow, earth-shaking wrath.
And when you defraud a god like Poseidon, the punishment is never simple. It's not just an eye for an eye.
Oh, no. It's never proportionate to the crime. It is perfectly psychologically tailored to inflict the maximum emotional damage. So Poseidon, just consumed by this salty rage, he chooses not to sink the Cretan fleet or strike Minos dead.
That would have been too clean.
Way too clean. He goes after the king's pride.
Which means going after his wife, Pasiphae. And Pasiphae wasn't just any mortal queen. The source really makes a point of her own divine lineage, her elegance, her sweetness. So why her, specifically?
Because in Minos' eyes, she was his magnificent prize. She was a reflection of his own elevated status. And Poseidon's goal was pure debasement. He wanted to rip apart everything Minos held dear, everything that made Pasiphae seem above other mortals.
It's cosmic bullying.
It's the ultimate form of it. The gods, as Ariadne later thinks to herself, they enjoy terribly tearing down anything a mortal values, especially beauty or virtue.
So the punishment isn't a physical attack. It's this psychological, corrupted form of vengeance.
He drives Pasiphae into an unnatural, animalistic passion for that very same sacred bull that Minos refused to sacrifice. The irony is just excruciating.
It becomes a full-blown madness, a terrifying, all-consuming lust.
And the only way she could possibly consummate this forbidden desire, was to get help from the court's most illustrious artisan,
Daedalo, Minos' prized inventor. He's forced to become an accomplice in the ultimate act of royal humiliation.
Pasiphae convinces him, and you have to imagine the pressure she put on him, to build a lifelike, hollow wooden cow, so convincing that she could hide inside it and mate with the sacred bull.
Which leads, of course, to the birth of Asterio, the Minotaur.
And the tragedy of the Minotaur's birth is just so immediate, so visceral. We think of the creature as just this monster, but the source gives us this heartbreaking duality right from his infancy.
Yeah, the details are what make it so monstrous, not just the shape, but the psychological effect of it.
Exactly. He was born with these delicate human features, long black eyelashes, perfect rosy little fingers. But below the ankles, that delicacy just ends. It gives way to hard, stone-like hooves and thick brown fur.
He was Minos' greatest shame proof of the god's revenge, his wife's crime, his own fraud. But he was also, and this is crucial,
A terrifying new source of power.
Minos can't kill him. That would just confirm the rumors, confirm the shame to his enemies, and who knows what Poseidon would do next. So he contains it.
He contains it in what becomes a monument to terror, the labyrinth. This was Daedalus' most celebrated and, at the same time, his most horrifying creation.
And it wasn't just a simple maze, right?
Not at all. Daedalus designed it to be so profoundly complex, such a dizzying tangle of tunnels, that even if the beast wasn't in there, anyone trapped inside could wander for years. They'd starve to death long before they ever saw daylight again. It was a flawless, gruesome killing machine.
And he builds this nightmare right into the palace of Naxos itself. You couldn't escape the terror. It was literally in the basement.
And the palace was adorned everywhere with the labyrinth, that famous double-axe symbol. For Minos, this represented the thunderous power of Zeus, and by extension, his own divine right to rule. It was a symbol of absolute blunt force.
But Ariadne, who grew up walking those hallways, she saw something different in that symbol.
She did. She saw the double axe not as a weapon, but as a butterfly emerging from a dark cocoon. It just perfectly highlights the contrast. Minos saw power and entrapment. Ariadne, a captive in her own home, saw this desperate hope of transformation and escape.
And the whole court is forced to live with this shame, the monster in the basement.
But Minos uses that fear. He leverages it into total tyranny. The source says he wore their collective disdain like armor.
It's a brilliant, if terrifying, way to rule. You accept the humiliation, and you turn it into a weapon.
But a cycle of divine fraud and domestic terror like that, it was never going to stay contained on Crete. It had to spread.
And it spreads through Minos' beloved son, Androgeo.
Right. Androgeo was a champion athlete. He excelled at the Panathenaic Games in Athens. But then he was torn apart by an infuriated bull on some remote Athenian hill. And Minos, just shattered by grief, he doesn't see it as a tragic accident. He blames Athens. He blames them for failing to protect his victorious son.
Which demands bloody retribution.
A massive war against Athens. And Minos uses the campaign not just for conquest, but to show everyone how ruthless he could be.
He stops on the way to destroy the city of the Bigura.
A crucial detail, because King Minos of Megara was supposed to be invincible, protected by a single purple strand of hair, and Minos, through subterfuge, secretly has it severed, and the invincible king just dies. It shows that Minos understands weakness, and he will exploit it with surgical precision.
So when he finally defeats Athens, the price he imposes it's beyond cruel.
It is. The annual tribute of 14 youths, 7 boys and 7 girls, to be sent to Crete and devoured alive by the Minotaur.
A tribute so horrific, it served as this continuous public declaration of Athenian submission. The source says 28 Athenian children were sent to their deaths over the years.
And this whole cycle of vengeance, Poseidon punishing Minos, Minos punishing Athens, this is what finally brings the hero Theseus into the story.
It's fascinating. The cost of one hero's death, Androgeo, leads to the deaths of 28 innocents, a score that Theseus will now try to settle, but only after Minos himself has laid the perfect trap.
Exactly. And now we have to look at the 2 men Minos was unknowingly holding captive. Daedalus, the genius who built the cage, and Theseus, the hero who was coming to destroy it. Let's start with Daedalus.
Minos keeps Daedalus on Crete, and on the surface he's celebrating his genius. Daedalus marries a Cretan woman, he has his son Icaro, he's basically the prize artist in residence.
So Minos could boast that he owned the world's most illustrious inventor. But the sources make it very clear that Daedalus was carrying this massive weight of despair.
Of guilt.
He knew he was complicit. Absolutely. His greatest creation, the labyrinth, was a gruesome killing trap for innocent children. He's being celebrated for his genius while living in the shadow of the horror that genius enabled, and that despair is what drove him to act.
But it wasn't a rash decision. He was planning his escape meticulously.
Oh.
For months.
For months. He was systematically gathering materials right under Minos' nose, scraps of metal wire from his other projects, and wax painstakingly scraped from household candles. He used these mundane, everyday things to build the wings for him and Icaro.
It shows that redemption, even for a genius, requires this quiet, patient preparation. He had to undo what he'd done.
While Daedalus is preparing his physical escape, Theseus arrives. He volunteers as one of the sacrificial youths, determined to end this tribute curse. But Theseus himself is surrounded by layers of uncertainty.
His parentage, for one, was he the son of King Egeo of Athens, or was Poseidon his real father?
Our sources suggest this might have been intentionally engineered by the goddess Athena. You have to remember, she had this massive rivalry with Poseidon over who would be the patron deity of Athens.
And she won that with the olive tree. So why would she want to link Poseidon to her city?
It's a brilliant bit of divine political engineering. By orchestrating Theseus' birth, she links the sea god to her beloved city through a heroic son. It creates this complex alliance, ensuring Athens is protected by two major deities, one of the land, one of the sea. Theseus wasn't just a hero, he was a political tool from the moment he was conceived.
And he proves his worth early on. He moves the massive stone to get Egeo's sword and sandals, establishing his claim, and then he makes this very deliberate choice, like Ericle before him.
He chooses the dangerous land route to Athens over the safe sea passage. He chose the path of virtue to clear the land of dangers, but his heroism was far from pure.
Right. The land route was infested with assassins and monsters, and Theseus confronted them with, shocking brutality.
The source gives this very disturbing anecdote about a bandit he captures.
The pine tree snap trap.
Yes, he used the bandit's own cruel trap against him. And this detail, when it's reported back in Crete, it makes Ariadne physically shudder in horror. It shows you that Theseus isn't just a liberator. He's a violent, almost cold-blooded avenger. It's a quality that's going to define his kingship later.
When he gets to Athens, he immediately faces another great manipulator, Medea.
Medea, a formidable witch who had fled Colchide after murdering her own children. She had worked her way into King Egeo's court through her dark arts.
And she sees Theseus as a rival to her own son by Egeo.
Instantly, she tries to poison him at a banquet. But Egeo recognizes the sword Theseus is carrying, the sword he left under the rock. He realizes he's about to poison his own son and stops her just in time. Medea, knowing the game is up, flees on the chariot of Helios.
So Theseus' world is just one of constant danger and hidden plots. But what's so fascinating is the timing of his arrival in Crete.
The irony is just staggering. He arrives in chains as a tribute, yet he has already achieved the very vengeance that Minos was seeking.
He had already avenged Androgeos' death himself.
Exactly. Before leaving Athens, Theseus had hunted down and killed Pallad and his 50 sons, the Pallantidae. They were the ones who were actually responsible for luring Androdeo to the bull that killed him.
So Minos is demanding tribute from Athens, completely unaware that he's just captured the one man who already settled the score.
He has unknowingly delivered the true avenger of his son right into the Minotaur's waiting mouth. His single-minded pursuit of revenge completely blinded him.
And this sets the stage for Ariadne's tragic choice.
Both she and her younger sister, Phaedra, were immediately infatuated with Theseus. The source says he had the composed force of a panther in ambush. It was irresistible to them.
And Ariadne resolves to help him, knowing the immense risk. She goes to Daedalus.
And Daedalus, who is just so burdened by his guilt over the labyrinth, he gives her the tools. First, the gomatolo, the ball of red thread. The color is so important. It's life, blood, passion, the thread of fate.
Her lifeline to the outside world.
Literally. And second, he gives her a powerful club, a clava. No one had ever managed to arm a victim before, but Daedalus gave her a warning, a dire warning.
He told her, point blank,
Yeah.
if you help Theseus, you can never come back to Crete.
Ever. The wrath of Minos was absolute, and she would suffer the fate of Scylla drowned for betraying her father. And Ariadne chose love. She chose Theseus over her family, her safety, her home.
She meets Theseus in secret, gives him the plan.
And Theseus, who is utterly convinced he's a vehicle of Poseidon's will, accepts her help. He says he's there to destroy Minos' experiment, and he seals the pact with a promise.
A huge promise. A vision of a future.
A powerful one. Ariadne would be his bride, and her sister Phaedra would dance at their wedding. It's this picture of a joyful, safe future in Athens that gives Ariadne the courage to commit the ultimate act of treason.
So Theseus goes into the labyrinth alone, tying the red thread. Ariadne waits outside, listening to the muffled slaughter.
And, again, we see his brutal efficiency. The Minotaur isn't dispatched with some noble finesse. He's beaten into a sticky paste and some scraps with the club.
And Theseus then beats the club into the sand, just to clean off the gore.
And emphasize his victory. He and the Athenians use the thread, they escape, they flee Crete, leaving Minos' greatest source of shame and power utterly destroyed, a triumphant victory that immediately sets the stage for a spectacular betrayal.
The flight was. It was fast. Theseus sails away with the Athenians, and they stop only briefly on the desolate island of Naxos.
Ariadne, who is exhausted, emotionally spent, and totally secure in his promise, she believes he's just going to get Phaedra and they'll continue their journey.
But the next morning, she wakes up utterly alone.
Theseus had sailed away, abandoned her on Naxos. This is the moment where the legend of Theseus really pivots from heroism to, well, to infamy.
And our sources are clear this wasn't an accident.
No, it was a deliberate act, an ignoble flight that Theseus would never boast about in his epics. He abandoned her because his victory had to be his alone. A hero who needed a woman and a ball of thread to get out of a maze. Well, that's a hero whose glory is diminished.
He needed absolute, unshared credit.
Exactly, and the cruelty is just compounded by the tragedy that's happening back at sea at the same time.
He forgot to change the sails.
In his rush, his victory, his self-absorption, he forgot King Aegeo had explicitly told him, "Raise white sails if you're victorious." But Theseus' ship approaches Athens still bearing the black sails of mourning.
And Aegeo, seeing those black sails, believes his son is dead.
And in his grief, he throws himself into the sea, which then takes his name, the Aegean Sea.
So Theseus arrives home not just as a hero, but as the king of Athens. He achieves ultimate glory at the cost of his father's life and his lover's trust. It really sets up his entire reign, glory built on betrayal and tragedy.
And meanwhile, Ariadne is completely desolate on Naxos. She stumbles upon this house of an unknown god marked only by a small statue of Dionysus.
The god of wine and pleasure.
And the miracles start happening immediately. The vines she had ripped up in her despair suddenly grow back. The statue produces crystal clear water, and after she offers a small libation, a gesture of faith, that water transforms into rich, ruby wine.
It's an immediate, benevolent welcome. The complete opposite of the betrayal she just faced.
Then Dionysus himself arrives on a pirate ship. The crew, they have no idea who he is. They're planning to sell this beautiful young god into slavery.
And this scene just perfectly captures Dionysus' whole personality.
It does. He's charming, he's playful, he's genuinely kind to Ariadne. But he's also capable of terrible, whimsical cruelty. He turns the entire disloyal crew into dolphins. All except for Acides, the one honorable man who tried to free him.
And he explains to Ariadne that he understands loss, which is so unique for an Olympian god.
He mourned his beloved Ampelo, who died when the fates cut his thread. Dionysus couldn't save him, but he placed him among the stars as a constellation. He proved his empathy even further by going down into the underworld.
To rescue his mortal mother, Semele.
Right. He needed Heracles to be there to distract Cerberus, but he did it. He brought her back to Olympus. And he tells Ariadne that the gods are prisoners of their childish whims. They can't truly love because they risk nothing. It's mortals, with their fleeting lives, who teach the gods the value of every second.
That's a radical idea.
Yeah.
That mortals are the teachers and the gods are the ones who are emotionally impoverished.
And that shared grief and empathy is what draws Ariadne to him. It's what allows her to start healing.
While Ariadne is finding this new divine life, Crete is falling apart. What happened to Minos?
Minos, just enraged, sails off on this futile, obsessive hunt for Daedalo, and he eventually dies this humiliating, ignoble death in a Sicilian court. He's burned alive in a tub during some kind of bathing ritual. His tyranny ends not in glory, but in petty vengeance far from home.
And his son, Deucalione, takes over a Crete that's on the brink of revolt.
He needs stability and fast, and the only way to get it is through politics. He needs peace with Athens.
So he proposes a marriage.
He offers Phaedra's hand in marriage to the new King Theseus. It's a way to cement an alliance and, compensate for the 28 children killed in the labyrinth.
And this is where Theseus' lie about Ariadne becomes official state policy.
It has to. He needed a story that removed his guilt and cemented his heroic status. So he tells Deucalione that Ariadne died on Naxos. He claims she was killed by a giant snake sent by Artemis to punish her for betraying her family.
Artemis, the virgin goddess.
Oh.
A convenient scapegoat.
The perfect scapegoat for a man who abandoned his lover. And so Phaedra is sent to Athens, living under the shadow of this lie about her sister's death, waiting to marry the very man who betrayed her family. The ultimate political marriage, founded entirely on a necessary lie.
Trapping Phaedra in the very place her sister was supposed to find happiness.
So Phaedra arrives in Athens, and she actually finds something she never had in Crete, which was a measure of respect. But her marriage to Theseus was miserable. Utterly miserable.
He quickly realized the hero she'd admired was not a hero.
Not at all. He was vain, ruthlessly self-serving, and prone to these irrational fits of temper, the same temper we saw when he was clearing that land route to Athens.
And the source says he actively enforced the lie about Ariadne.
Oh, absolutely. As king, Theseus demanded full, singular credit for ending the Minotaur curse. He explicitly ordered Phaedra never to mention the crucial role that she or Ariadne had played. He was terrified the Athenians would lose faith in him if they knew he needed help from a woman.
His glory had to be absolute.
Regardless of the cost to the truth. And it's into this miserable, controlled environment that Theseus' son, Ippolito, arrives.
Ippolito was raised by his Amazonian mother, and he was the complete opposite of his father.
The absolute antithesis. He was kind, devoted to virtue, he loved his horses, and most crucially for the tragedy that follows, he had taken a solemn vow of chastity to the virgin goddess Artemis. He was pure, perhaps. Fatally so.
And Phaedra, who feels completely unseen, trapped in this loveless political marriage, she develops this overwhelming illicit passion for her stepson.
It's not just lust, it's this desperate need for connection, for recognition. He was everything Theseus wasn't.
And she becomes so desperate that she confides her plan to Ariadne, all the way on Naxos.
Yes, she actually believed Dionysus would grant them asylum if she and Ippolito fled there. She thought the god of transgression and revelry would welcome their union as an act of rebellion against Theseus' tyranny.
But Ariadne, by this point, she's seeing the darker side of Dionysus.
A terrifying reality behind that charming facade. She was living happily with their children, but she'd grown suspicious of his followers, the Maenads.
They would return from their mountain rituals with stains on their clothing.
Stains of dark, purple-red liquid. Was it blood or was it wine? She didn't know. So she secretly followed Dionysus to a moonlit clearing, and she witnessed the savage ritual known as sparagmos.
This detail it's horrifying. It shatters everything for her.
Yeah.
What did she see?
It was pure ritualistic savagery. The Maenads, driven into this ecstatic frenzy, they violently tore apart a live young goat, a capretto, with their bare hands. The violence wasn't symbolic. It was visceral, bloody, and terrifying.
A sacrifice of pure frenzy. But then it was followed by a display of divine power.
Right before her eyes, Dionysus magically reassembled the goat. He restored it to life and just let it wander away completely unharmed. This spectacle, this key of life and death, was how he attracted followers, the promise of frenzied release and ultimate divine protection. But for Ariadne, it was a terrifying illusion.
She confronts him. She accuses him of cruelty, of seeking fame over his own family.
And Dionysus is heartbroken, but he's honest. He admits that being a god and loving mortals just means watching them die, over and over again. His obsessive drive for fame, for the adoration of his cult, it was his coping mechanism for eternity.
But that desperation for worshippers leads directly to one of the most horrifying acts in the whole story.
It does. Seeking retribution against cities that reject his cult, he sails to Argos, which is ruled by the hero Perseo. Perseo refuses to allow the Dionysian rites. He fears the women's vices, and he's loyal to Hera.
And Dionysus' response is terrifying.
He drives the women of Argos into a mad frenzy, and they slaughter their own children. And here is the ethical horror. Dionysus confesses to Ariadne that, unlike the goat, he cannot resurrect these human sacrifices.
And that seals it for her.
It cements her final, devastating view of her husband. He was equal to the most powerful of the gods, or the meanest of men. The illusion of his power was exposed.
And while Ariadne is witnessing this divine cruelty, Phaedra is meeting her tragic end back in Athens.
Her attempt to seduce Ippolito fails because of his absolute vow of chastity to Artemis. Fearing discovery and the disgrace that would follow, she hangs herself.
But she leaves behind one final act of manipulation.
A suicide note, falsely accusing the virtuous Ippolito of rape.
And Theseus, enraged, blinded by his own vanity and rash temper, he immediately believes the lie.
He uses a wish that was granted to him by his father, Poseidon, and he curses Ippolito. The curse results in Ippolito being fatally dragged by his own beloved horses. Theseus' rash judgment leads to the violent death of his own son. The cycle of tragedy started by Minos' hubris is completed by Theseus.
This sets the stage for Ariadne's final transcendent act. She confronts the vengeful Theseus at Argos, the man who still thinks she's dead.
And then she confronts Perseo, the hero who killed Medusa. And Perseo, when Dionysus arrives, is preparing to use his polished shield with the head of Medusa embedded in it against the god.
Ariadne, having seen the cruelty of gods and heroes, makes a deliberate, final choice.
She recognizes Medusa's suffering. Medusa wasn't a monster by choice. She was punished by Athena for Poseidon's crime against her. Ariadne, who had spent her entire life navigating the consequences of male vanity, Minos, Poseidon, Theseus, Dionysus, she finally sees a kindred spirit in eternal suffering. And she deliberately looks into Medusa's eyes, reflected in Perseus' shield.
And what did she see?
She saw that Medusa's eyes weren't the reptilian green of legend, but a deep sapphire blue, just filled with unending pain. Her final sacrifice was an act of recognition, an act of defiance against the entire system that had punished them both.
As the slow tide of stone turns her to crystal, Perseus looks at her, and he weeps.
Dionysus arrives later, and recognizing this profound, final act of defiance and love, a love that chose shared suffering over divine protection, he transforms her petrified form. He places her among the stars. He creates the corona borealis, her crown of stars, to guide sailors and comfort women forever, a permanent light on her memory and her defiance.
A stunning conclusion, where the only real agency is found in choosing your own end.
We started with Ariadne, a young princess trapped by the labyrinth, the great symbol of her father's tyranny. But she found agency, first through betraying her family, and then ultimately through immense personal sacrifice. A final, clear-eyed act of defiance.
Her story, and Phaedra's terrible psychological collapse, it really reveals that heroism, at least as Theseus practices it, isn't just prone to betrayal. It's often built on the necessity of betrayal, on ruthless self-promotion.
And divinity, as shown by Dionysus, while it can be benevolent, it's too often indistinguishable from this capricious, fame-seeking cruelty that's just used to mask eternal grief.
The ultimate tragedy here is the continuous agonizing cost paid by the mortals. Pasiphae, the 28 Athenian children, Icaro, Phaedra, Ippolito, the slaughtered children of Argos.
They all paid the price for the vanity of kings, the ego of heroes, and the whims of the gods.
And here's the unsettling takeaway from all of this. Knowing that a god is cruel or that a hero is flawed is completely useless as a defense against their power. Theseus and Dionysus were going to exact their price no matter what.
The only true lasting victory, the only thing that can be eternalized, lies in how you choose to face the inevitable, and Ariadne chose to face it with clarity and defiance.
She was immortalized as the corona borealis, guiding sailors in the dark. But when you think about the trail of sorrow left by Theseus and the terrible, beautiful power of Dionysus, you have to ask a final question.
What exactly does that starry crown really honor? Is it her loyalty to a love that brought her to Naxos? Or is it her ultimate defiance against the divine male ego that manipulated her entire life, right up until her final breath?
A question worth considering the next time you look up at the night sky. The heroes might get the songs, but the stars and the memory they embody, they belong to the defiant.